Copies of Endgame in the Netherlands allege that Charles and Kate raised concerns about what skin colour Meghan and Harry's first child would have. But the author says this is a printing error and books have now been pulled from the shelves in Holland. Speaking to the BBC last night, Omid Scobie doubled down on his claims that it was all a mistake and that he never named anyone specifically.
Yeah, what a series of events, right? And what a frustrating experience for me for a book that was so heavily vetted, legaled, I's dotted, T's crossed, and a book that I was extremely proud of, now completely overshadowed by an event that has caused me a lot of frustration as well. We have a full investigation going on into this series of events that happened.
This whole row, you'll remember, started after Meghan Markle's infamous interview with Oprah Winfrey back in 2021. Let's have a quick reminder of what she actually said.
And also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What? About how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
Hold up.
There's
Stop
several
right now.
There's several conversations.
There's a
about
conversation with you?
With Harry.
But 2 years later, Prince Harry dismissed any claims of racism.
In the Oprah interview, you accuse members of your family of racism. You don't even...
Well, of... The British press said that.
Right.
Did Meghan ever mention that they were racist?
She said there were troubling comments about
there was concern
colour.
about his skin colour.
Right. Wouldn't you describe that as essentially racist?
I wouldn't, not having lived within that family.
Joining me in the studio now, barrister Paula Rowan-Edrian. Very nice to see you. And from LA, podcast host Kinsey Schofield. Good to have you aboard again, Kinsey. Let me start with Paula, because the suggestion is that when the royal family's response, or that given on their behalf, is that all options are being considered, that what might happen is some kind of legal action taken against someone. But this is such a deeply convoluted tale. It's quite hard to know how anyone could be sued or exactly who would be sued or indeed for what.
Absolutely. And don't forget, Vanessa, one thing that you always have to remember when you're considering litigation is litigation risk. Whatever type of claim you might think you have, what you don't want to do is to step into an arena where actually you're no longer in control. It's a judge. You're reliant on your barristers. You don't know what the evidence is going to be necessarily coming from the other side. And of course, there are things that you might not necessarily want to discuss, which you would have to. All of that is now going to be laid out on the table. So privacy may well be an issue here.
And also, I'm wondering who would be prosecuted or sued by whom if some action were taken. Would it be the author himself? Would it be the publishers, the Dutch publishers and translators, or whom would it be?
Absolutely. I think potentially all of those who you've just identified could be named. I think what they would look at, they'd look at the chain, wouldn't they, of command in terms of who had their hands on the manuscript, who was the decision maker. Ultimately, there is something called vicarious liability. If you're an employee and you were the fateful work experience employee, Vanessa, who printed everything off and thought you'd done an amazing job, but off it went and to be published, you know, ultimately it's not going to be you. It would be the publishers. But of course, it's still going to be a very complicated task to identify who that person is. There will be a lot of talking. There'll be a lot of discussion between lawyers. There'll be a lot of exploration. And it may well be, and I hope, quite frankly, that this is dealt with quietly, through negotiation, without there needing to be any further court proceedings.
All right, let me bring Kinsey to this. Kinsey, obviously this is occupying front page after front page in the United Kingdom. It's a huge story, and at the moment it's not diminishing at all. Don't feel it's ebbing away whatsoever. People are talking about it on television, on the radio, but also in the street to one another. And I wonder how it's playing out in America.
It's, I would say, not necessarily on the front page of our newspapers, but it's certainly, you know, taking over the headlines when it comes to some of these celebrity gossip websites. They're eating this up. You know, another soap opera storyline for Americans when it comes to the British royal family. And yeah, I think that Meghan Markle, just watching all of this unfold today, I wonder if she regrets doing that Oprah Winfrey interview, because everything moving forward after that, they tried to avoid the narrative of Archie's skin color. They didn't want to talk about it on the Netflix special. Prince Harry avoided it in his book Spare. So I wonder if they had regrets about the Oprah Winfrey interview, and if today they're sitting in Montecito saying, you know, that really was such a negative experience and we're being haunted by it today.
I mean, I have read Endgame. I've read every single word on every single page. I would swear to that in a court of law. And I would say that the thesis that Omid Scobie is really kind of promoting in the book is that the monarchy is pretty much defunct, that it's on its last legs, that it's old-fashioned, hidebound, prejudiced, privileged, you know, possibly racist, and doesn't have much of a future. Now, obviously, in this country, there are some people who agree with him. In fact, there may be more people who agree with him maybe than other people might realise. But in this country, there is a huge well of affection for and loyalty to the royal family. How's that playing out in America?
I mean, I do think that we admire the royal family. We have for quite some time, and I was surprised by the amount of support we saw King Charles III have upon the death of Queen Elizabeth II. There's still interest in them. I mean, look at The Crown. Americans love to watch The Crown, and we've got that coming out in 2 weeks. So more of that chaos is going to be stirred up. But I do think that Americans take race issues very seriously. If this story and those names were released 2 years ago, I think that the royal family would have to act much more aggressively. But things have calmed down here in the States. You know, we do absolutely admire your royal family.
Paula, you know, there's been much discussion about whether the comments alleged to have been made are actually racist, or whether they denote simple curiosity, or whether people from all different ethnicities, if there is a dual heritage relationship, will ask something of that kind. And it won't be because they're racist, it will be because they're interested. Maybe they don't realise that it could potentially be offensive. I just wonder, on the level of kind of racism and offence taken and offence given, how highly you rate what's alleged to have been said.
I think that's a difficult question, because often when you believe that you have suffered from racism, there's a context at play, and that context is, generally speaking, not one individual event. There would have been a series of events that would lead you to believe, OK, I'm not going mad, OK, this is not me with a chip on my shoulder, OK, this is not me just having a bad day because that happened and this happened and that happened, or somebody else may have come and spoken to you about some behaviour that they thought they were uncomfortable about. So if we're looking at this as just an individual event, then I struggle to see how it would be considered as racist. If the conversation was, you know what, I'm concerned about our child's skin colour, Vanessa. What's our child going to look like? Talk to me. I would then expect you to say to me, well, what do you mean, Paula? What's your concern? Well, it could be that I'm concerned because maybe our child's going to suffer racism and I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. It could be a concern of, well, my child's not going to look like me and I really want my child to look like me. Mm. You know, we just don't know. It could be that the concern was, well, what's it going to be like having a black child in our family? Because everyone's going to think, whatever you say, that the child is black, not mixed race, not anything, but the child is black, and that child is going to suffer racism. So it really does depend on the context. Now, I say that because we know, don't we, that Meghan and Harry both feel that she has suffered racism while she was in this country. And we've also heard from Neil Basu, who is the ex-terrorist Met Police officer, chief police officer, that Meghan suffered a number of very serious threats to life, and that some people are even now serving prison sentences in relation to those threats to her life. So the far right and racism, it was there for her, you know. And so it's difficult, isn't it, Vanessa, to just say, well, is this a one-off or is this a series of events that's led her to feel, and led Harry to feel, because let's not forget Harry mentioned it as well, it's led them both to feel very uncomfortable, very vulnerable.
Kinsey, in this country, you might say that we've heard a great deal less from Harry and Meghan than we were wont to do at the heat of Spare, and, you know, when Megxit occurred and when the documentary came out, you know, we seemed to be absolutely flooded with information about them. And then it all went rather quiet. And it's sometimes insinuated and sometimes said outright in British papers that their popularity in the United States has lessened with each month that's gone by. And I wonder where they are positioned in the hearts and the affections of Americans. Do they think they're wronged? Do they think they're a you know, injured hero and heroine? Have they pretty much had enough of them? What do they think of them?
Well, polling suggests that Harry and Meghan's popularity has declined here in the States. Meghan's more so than Prince Harry. But I would also say, to be fair, are Harry and Meghan not taking on the never complain, never explain at this point in time? Are they pursuing the exact same advice the royal family would have given them 3 years ago? Perhaps that's what's happening. Or are they strategizing behind the scenes to see what their options are if Meghan truly feels violated by details of this letter going on? I want to be fair to them, because we haven't had an official word. Do I think they should speak on it? Perhaps. I think it would be in their best interest. But popularity-wise, statistically, their popularity has declined here in the States.
And why is that? Just because they always seem to be pretty much portraying themselves as wronged and victims and injured, or just the razzle-dazzle's gone out of it? Why should their popularity have declined?
Well, I do think that Americans admire the British royal family, and it started to look like a constant, never-ending series of attacks. These are two people that are absolutely stunning. They have a beautiful family, and they are privileged. They live in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. Oprah's their neighbor, Katy Perry. So they're lucky. And at some point, especially in America, we are, you know, tighten up your bootstraps. Tomorrow's going to be a better day. And it felt like these were two individuals that were trying to monetize victimhood and stuck in the past. And we just want them to move on and to acknowledge that they have a blessed life and existence, and utilize some of the opportunities they've been given to create real change.
I wonder about that, Paula, this idea of, you know, acknowledging their blessings and also possibly saying something now. Either saying, yes, we did give the information to Omid Scobie, you know, we told him, you know, we did let him see the letter, he knows what the names are, but we didn't think he was going to make it public, so we're very sorry for the damage caused. Or we're glad that it's been made public because it's very important that the public knows exactly what they're dealing with within the royal family. Or to double down on Harry saying they weren't really racist, it was unconscious bias, so therefore they don't think it was racist. They're very sorry that the King and the Princess of Wales are, you know, being maligned in this way, or something or other. I mean, they could say something, they could diffuse it, or they could ignite it, they could do all sorts of stuff. They're not saying a thing. I was going to say something rude, but luckily I didn't. They're not saying a word. I was going to say a something word, but I'm not. But they're not, are they?
They're not, and I have to say I can understand why, because I suspect they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, if I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah,
you know, and I think, quite frankly, what we are seeing is the unravelling, sadly, of a family who talk to other people but don't talk to each other. And that's what we've witnessed over essentially the past 3 years. This constant talking to others instead of to each other. And when the Oprah interview occurred, and obviously I don't know what happened. We never know. But what I would have done was absolutely reached out. What I would have done is absolutely forced, you know, had this expectation that we would be sitting down as a family, that there would be therapeutic intervention that occurred, because what we're seeing now is simply more trauma.
Except, Kinsey, you could understand it, couldn't you, if, for example, the Waleses, William and Kate, didn't want to sit down at all or even speak on the telephone to Harry and Meghan, because they might well feel they can't trust them to keep whatever they say confidential. And if you can't trust members of your own inner sanctum, your own flesh and blood, because you don't know whether they're going to put what you've said into a documentary or tell Oprah Winfrey or somebody else about it, you can't really sit round a table. You can never trust yourself to trust yourself to speak to them at all.
And it's Andrew Morton that pointed out in his book about Meghan Markle that Harry and Meghan started talking to Oprah Winfrey about a sit-down interview 6 months after they got married. So they started talking to Oprah about these big revelations much sooner than they actually sat down with Oprah Winfrey. And to know that kind of strategy was happening behind the scenes, I do think that there is an element of betrayal that the royal family feels about Harry and Meghan's actions. That's on top of them building a website that laid out their new roles before okaying it with the royal family. There were several things that went into preparation of them leaving the royal family before they actually had any conversations with them and establishing what their new roles were going to be, half in, half out. And I do think that the royal family was surprised by perhaps the audacity of Harry and Meghan. And it's not just what's happened since the Oprah Winfrey interview. A lot of preparation happened before that probably made the family feel hurt as well.
Thank you both very much indeed for coming in. This discussion goes on and on.